Previously, we had a look at what is Shadcn UI and how to add Shadcn UI to style our components, followed by installing and configuring React Router DOM. In this video, we'll start our backend API with ExpressJS and configure it with CORS and env. And lastly, modularize this entire backend API with a MVC folder structure. So with that, first let's open a terminal on the folder called backend. Type the command npm init. Just press enter on all these and click Y. So we right now have initialized our package.json file. Now the way that we use JavaScript on the backend is by using Node.js, which gives us a runtime environment to run the application outside of a browser. And ExpressJS is used mainly for building APIs, which is what we will be building in this video. So let's install ExpressJS and see how it looks like. npm install express at 5 because we will be working with the version 5. And next we also have to install another package called NodeMem. Let's say we are making some sort of a change or modification to any of our files, and NodeMem will automatically refresh the server for us. And now we need to create a file called get ignore and press enter. Make sure you create it at the root. We just need to type node modules here. Now node module has, let's say it has thousands of files that do not necessarily go into a repository, because we can just directly create it by just typing npm install. So due to that reason, we don't want that folder to be going to our backend repository if we are creating one. Let me close all these other files and then open up package.json. And in here, below main.index, we need to type and it would be module. And then under scripts, one will be start, so that we will be using node, and then index.js. Then on dev, this one would be nodemon, and then index.js. Index.js is our starting point of our application, and nodemon, like I said, would simply restart the server automatically whenever we make changes to our application. So now we need to do is create this index.js. First, we need to import Express from our Express library. And after that, we need to type const app equal Express. This would let us create an instance of an Express server. And then we do app.get. Get is an HTTP method. We are just doing a basic test route to check if the server is properly functioning. And then inside this HTTP method, we pass API/test. Now /API is where our API will be, and then /test is the actual endpoint that we can go to and then test our application. And then we have two parameters for request and response. And then we type response.json, and then we just say here server. So what usually would happen is, this is a get HTTP method, and get can be used to like fetch data from our API. So whenever we go to this /API/test, it will return us a JSON response that says server is running. And then we need to create a variable called port, and let's give this a value of 8021. And then we type app.listen. Here we pass the port. This port basically refers to the port number in which we want to listen to this server. And then we also pass in a callback function here, where we do a console.log, in which we say server. Let's just copy this. By the way, I'm using backticks here, not inverted commas. This is backticks. If you're using a mechanical keyboard, you will find this on top of your tab button on your keyboard. We need to pass a variable here. Okay, before that variable, we have to type this URL first, and then we type the port number. So now on this app Express instance of an application, our server, we will be listening to this port, which is 8021. We will be shown a console.log called server is running on localhost on this port number. Now let's run our application. Let's type npm run tab. Our server is now running on http/localhost on the port 8021. Oh, and by the way, we need to add this here. I forgot to add that previously. Okay, now let's go to this link. So this is what that link would look like. So let's go to a test route, which was, like I said, /API/test, and then press enter. And now you can see our server is running successfully. And if you probably run this, you might just see a different interface here because I'm actually using an extension here. Let me quickly show you what this extension is. So this is the extension I'm using on my browser, message, to test this application. And once installed, whenever you open a GET request, if it has a JSON response, you will definitely see it in a very formatted way. And yeah, let's go ahead and install CORS to our server. We can do it by typing npm install CORS, and let's see how we can use it. So come down to index.js file, and in here below the app, you must use app.use and then type here CORS. So you will need to like import CORS from CORS package. What we did here is app.use. It's like a tool from ExpressJS that we can use to add a function between a request and a response pipeline. So anything we pass inside this app.use will simply get called on every single request that is made to the server. Now, CORS is a web security standard that simply lets other servers that are not hosted on 8021 specifies whether these websites or links or URLs will be allowed to access their resources. Now, our back end is hosted on 8021, but our front end, as you remember, I think it should be on 5137. Now, these are two different hosts. So, if we don't specify this, we will absolutely get an error when we try to connect our front end and the back end. And like if we were to fetch data from the back end, you will definitely come across an error. I'll show you what that error is in the future, but just remember, adding this line here will simply mean that it would enable CORS for all the routes. It will provide complete access to all those routes. There is a security issue in here as well, but since we are still locally developing this application, this is totally fine. If you have hosted a front-end URL in hosting website, you can include that here so that only that website URL can access your backend API, because you must keep your backend API safe. This is where we have direct access to a database which can contain a lot of data and information about our application. Watch this far? Leave a like. It helps me reach a wider audience on YouTube. And let's actually add some comments here. Alright, cool. So we need to install another package. Let us quickly install that. .env. Now .env would let us load environment variables from a .env file into our application's runtime environment in Node.js server. And we use it to make it easier for us to manage some important settings in our application. Like let's say we are having API keys. That API key cannot be exposed outside to anyone. We need to like keep it very securely, and that is why we have a .env file. So let's quickly create a .env file. Remember, the dot comes first and then env. And not only API keys, we will be storing our database credentials as well, because our database credentials will contain a username and a password which you do not actually want exposed anywhere outside. Now on this file, let's type port equals 8021, and then we have to import .env from the .env package. We need to pass this here .env.config function. Now this line will let us load env variables from this file here. This port number is now an env variable. So, and then you come down here and then you type process.env dot, and then in here you pass the name you have given here. In here we have specified this as port, and that is it. So let's change this to 8025. We are passing the port number as an environment variable from the .env file to our index.js file. How do we do that? We use this line of code here, .env.config function. This function will let us load all the env variables from this file. Process.env is the normal way we use to get pretty much any environment variable into our Node.js server. Now I'll show you why I made this 8025 now. Let us quickly run the application. Now you will see the server is running on localhost 8021, but in here we have specified 8025. This would not. Why? Because in here we are specifying to get the port number from the env file, or if not, you can use 8025. Now let's say we didn't specify this port number. The server will be running on localhost 8025 and not 21. So that's just a small thing that I just wanted to mention here. Alright, so let's move on to the next part. So now let's do something interesting. So all this happened in our main index.js file. We can modularize this further. We will be following the MVC architecture to properly manage this API. We need to create two folders. One is for controllers and the outs. And inside the controller, we will create a file called test controller.js. And inside this file, let's just copy this one here. So inside this one, we won't be needing this part. Just type here export const test server equals request response. We have created a test server function that takes a request and a response. As a response, we will be showing server is running. So we have just created our first controller. Let's say they are a way to like group related request handling logic separately. Now we didn't specify the route in here. So to do that, we'll create a new file here called test routes, test route.js. Let's just copy this from here. Okay, now we need to create const router equals express.router. This is a built-in class in the ExpressJS framework, and it can be used to like create a new router object, and it can be used to like organize or modularize our routes. So let's continue now. So we now take that router variable and then pass a get method, and to that we will be specifying test comma, and then we will be passing the test server from our controller, and then lastly we will just export default router. Always make sure to export default router. Make sure this part is there. If not, the application will not work. In here, we are giving it as API/test. In here, we are just giving this as test. We will be adding that API directly on the index page. Obviously, all our routes will be inside the main route, which is API. So we can just directly update it on our index page, and then we can just run everything else on top of that. This has to be .js. Whenever you import a file that is in JavaScript, you have to mention this .js. But if you're like working on TypeScript, you can simply omit this. But for JavaScript, you must absolutely mention this one. Okay, so we can simply come down here and add a comment here called routes. And then in here we pass app.use/API. And then to this one, we will be passing test routes. We have to import it manually. We'll just remove this one. And now let's run the application and see. And as you saw right now, it's showing server is running with that emoji symbol of a rocket. Our request came to here first, app.use. We went to API/test. It goes here, and then after going here, it will go to get and then /test. So from there, it will call this test server, and then this test server will take the request, and then it will respond to us with a JSON response that says server is running. By the way guys, I forgot to mention we have to enter .env in here. This is because like I said, anything you add here will not get added to your Git repository. Now with that, we have fully configured our backend API project setup. Now make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for the next video in this series. See you on the next one. Bye bye.